and a variety of national and local news, talk, TV, radio programs. Mark has never before held political office, and he's answering the call of public duty and running for the U.S. Senate seat to fill the seat of retiring Senator Roy Blunt. Would you welcome Mark McCloskey?
Ladies and gentlemen, this country is in the middle of a civil war. I mean, I can reiterate just about everything that the Attorney General said, with the exception that we don't have 10 years. We don't have our children's lives. We don't have our grandchildren's lives. This country will fail if we don't do something right now. This country, the people that run this country right now are genuinely evil. The devil is real, evil is real. Christ will prevail in the end, but he's going to need our help, because right now we've got an administration in D.C. that thinks that freedom and democracy and our democratic republic is antithetical to everything they stand for. Right now, we are on the verge of what Klaus Schwab calls that great reset. We're on the verge right now of the fruition of what's been planned for my entire life. I'm only 65 years old, but I can tell you, for my entire life, the left has been pushing to do everything that the pastor talked about, to demoralize and relativize our lives, to take the family out of the system. The family is the core of our democracy, the core of our system, to raise people with a moral underpinning where we're all pulling in the same direction. We know right from wrong intrinsically because it's what God taught us to do. But that doesn't work for the left, because in the left there's only one parent, and that's the state. There's only one family, and that's the family of socialism. And what's going on right now in this country is all these things that all Republicans will agree about: the open border, inflation, the loss of energy independence, all the things that the Attorney General talked about are not the result of buffoonery or ignorance or inadvertent, or the fact that Joe Biden is a senile old poop, or the fact that Kamala Harris is the dumbest human being ever elected to office. This is all part of an organized plan to weaken the United States, to weaken our economy, to weaken our resolve, to demoralize the people, to make us afraid of crime in the streets. And what is happening all over every one of these events are crises du jour to keep us from focusing on the big picture, and that is that they're taking our country away from us, they're taking our freedoms away from us. We have a President of the United States that announces a disinformation governance board in the United States of America with a First Amendment. And ladies and gentlemen, where's the outrage? Where are 50 Republican senators that ought to be standing up on the steps of the Capitol building screaming, we can't have something like this in America. You can't have it, instead. And every time that this government does some massively unconstitutional thing, like mask mandates and vax mandates, and reversing the stay in Mexico policy. By the way, my wife and I have been down to the border. And all these things that the Attorney General talked about Title 42 and the Remain in Mexico policy and finishing the wall. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I was down there after all these things happened, and it's just being absolutely ignored by our government. Our government disdains the rule of law. Our government disdains the rulings of the Supreme Court. Our government, Chuck Schumer, stood on the Supreme Court steps and threatened two sitting Supreme Court justices, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. Right now, the President of the United States is encouraging people to go and harass and intimidate the Supreme Court. He's encouraging people to, and guess what? Some lunatic goes up and tries to kill Brett Kavanaugh. These are not accidental things. These are not the result of inadvertence. Ladies and gentlemen, I've never been a candidate for anything before. If you'd asked me 2 years ago what I wanted most in my life, I'd say for the world to leave me the heck alone and let me live out the rest of my life in peace and comfort. But the world has chosen differently. There is no more time for politics as usual. I mean, Eric Schmidt talked about not wanting to elect a congressman that's been there for 12 years and hasn't really distinguished himself. Well, Eric Schmidt's been in government for 17 years, and until he started running for Senate, 2 different U.S. congressmen in this state used the exact same phrase to describe him. They called him the ninth Democrat, okay? And he voted for a $480 million China hub in the city of St. Louis. And he wanted to sell Missouri farmland to the Chinese. Okay, this is before he started running for Senate. So you have to ask yourself, when did people become fighters? When did they start standing up for your rights? Before or after they decided to become a politician? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've never been a politician, but I've had a tendency to always stand up for things. And ladies and gentlemen, when the mob came to my door, I didn't have to ask somebody what to do. I went and grabbed a rifle, and I stood up for our rights, and I stood up for the Constitution, and I stood up to defend my wife, my daughter, my home, my hearth, and everything I stood up for, I stand up for you. Ladies and gentlemen, there's no time for politics as usual. There's no time for politicians as usual. You need to break the chain. You need to send people to D.C. to clean out this swamp, to clean up the Dean State, people that have demonstrated a willingness to risk their life, if necessary, to stand up for our rights. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm not subject to intimidation. I'm not somebody that is under the control of any party. By the way, the Attorney General thanked Ted Cruz for endorsing him. Well, Ted Cruz and the Attorney General have the same general consulting firm. And he says, you don't have to ask me what my opinion is. Well, I was down at CPAC with the Attorney General, and one of the conservative networks asked him if he would vote against Mitch McConnell if he got elected to the Senate. And he said he had to wait until he consulted with his Republican colleagues like Rand Paul and Ted Cruz before he could answer that question. In other words, he said, I haven't been told what the party line is yet, so I can't answer that question. Ladies and gentlemen, you can't have politicians like that anymore. You can't have politics as usual. Einstein's definition of insanity was doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Well, if you like the crisis this country is in, if you like where we are right now, the traditional politicians got us here. So if you like it, vote for a traditional politician. Vote for the establishment candidate. Then hold your breath and wait for change, because it isn't going to happen. Ladies and gentlemen, this country was founded the first time in the history of the world. A country was created from scratch by people who wanted to create a system where the people were protected from the power of government rather than giving the government power over people. We are so close to losing all of this. Like he says, 2 votes away. If that John Lewis voting rights bill passes, there'll never be another honest election the rest of our lives. If they are successful in doing what they want to do right now, in eliminating inroads into the Second Amendment, then eventually all the Second Amendment, then eventually, like in New York State, you'd have to prove to the government that you have some special right to carry a gun, and then no guns at all. Well, look what's happened in New Zealand and Australia, right? They locked them down, they put them in concentration camps because they gave up their guns. Ladies and gentlemen, without the Second Amendment, the rest of our rights are just hypothetical. Guns aren't here to shoot, like that idiot Uncle Joe says, deer in Kevlar vests. We have guns to protect ourselves, protect our freedom, and keep the government at bay. The Second Amendment is about keeping the government a little concerned that there's a couple of 100 million of us out there that can defend ourselves and will stand up for our rights. And ladies and gentlemen, that's what I represent. If you send me to Washington, D.C., I absolutely guarantee you that no one's going to have to tell me what the party line is, because I get my line from Jesus Christ. I get my line from a lifetime of doing what's right for my fellow man, and I don't have to listen to some party executive to tell me what to think.